what I'm defending
Well,
the building.
but wouldn't they just not put it on because it wasn't authentic, so to speak, i.e. not written by, say, a Muslim? I mean, the thing is that are Muslims going to come forward and write plays like this?
Well,
are they going to?
Well, Monica Ali wrote Brick Lane. I mean, it's very, very different, but she got into trouble and her film crew got into trouble.
The novelists are in a different place because obviously the equivalent of the aristocracy in the novels are expressing themselves with enormous
and there's a building which could be bombed.
And in TV, I mean, there was a play on 15, 20 years ago by Ian Curtis, who I think was married to Joanna Trollope, and it was about the Falklands War, and it was originally written for TV. It was about 2 hours long, and the BBC said, we're not doing it, it's too right-wing, we're not going to do it, so it was dropped. And then 10 years later, because it was later and things always look different 10 years on, Ian went to radio, to John Burt, whoever it was, and said, come on, let's do this. And they made it into a radio play, and it was done. And there was huge uproar about it, because it was just, you know, people were saying it's too right-wing and it shouldn't be on. And I think everyone, you know, people should say what they want to say, and that sounds like I'm contradicting what I'm saying, telling Richard about the life of Iqbal, but I think there's a context and there's a way of catching it, and you don't know till you write it.
And I do think theatre is different just in the sense that it's different physically, you know. Martin Amis can write that, I thought, absolutely sensational long article about horrorism. He can write that. He couldn't probably stand in the middle of the Olivier stage in front of 1,100 strangers and say it.
For 4 weeks.
I mean, it's not. I mean, the Russian theatre siege is the most staggering example of it. But the fact is, you are in public. People are exposed to physical danger in a way which is different from any other form of literature. So it has to be a consideration. And you may find it mealy-mouthed, to use that trademark phrase of the right. But it is a fact that Nicholas Heitner is personally responsible for the health and safety of the people who work behind the bar in the Littleton, you know. So it is a consideration. I'm not saying it's not.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, actually, the police are responsible for it.
Well, yes.
If they won't do it.
I can see some people sort of gagging to make points and everything. We've really got a very good discussion going here. So could I ask if anyone wants to make any points or have any questions to do so? If you could just stand up and say who you are, that makes things a lot easier. The lady over here.
Hello, I'm Stella Duffy, primarily a novelist, occasionally a theatre writer. I think part of the problem with what I've heard is that it's been so incredibly London-centric. When you talk about the theatre hierarchy, what you really mean is the Royal Court, the National, Hampstead's Habs, the places that are pissing you off for not doing nice enough or appropriate right-wing plays. 2 years ago, I went to Basingstoke to see a friend in the Norman Conquests. I could not ask to see a more right-wing play. 3 lots of nice white middle-class couples, being nice white middle-class couples. That is getting done everywhere, in every rep in this country. If all you perceive theatre to be is what's going on in the half dozen, I would question Richard when he says they're left. I think they're very liberal intelligentsia theatres. I really don't see that you have any problem. All you need to do is go out of London and go to the nice reps who are gagging for funding. So what they have to keep doing is do plays that were moderately successful in the 70s and 80s and do them time and time again, but are showing only the status quo to Middle England. That's incredibly right-wing. That's a right-wing play for you.
No, but you see, I would say, I mean, I think this was directed to you, Richard, but I mean, I think, aren't you confusing depicting people with being right-wing? I mean, just because that people are middle-class and white in the play does not make it right-wing. I mean, it really does not.
I perceive it does. My view is that unless you're being actively political, you are still being... And apolitical is still political. So if what you're showing to Middle Britain is itself, that is still a political act.
It's my kind of Ben Elton
Personally, I believe all
point.
theatres.
Richard, do you want to...
I'm not sure. Are you having a crack at me, Stella?
No, I wasn't actually having
No, I don't think you were. No,
discussion being so incredibly London.
Well, I've already made that point with the Ben Elton point. It's a very similar point, isn't it? So.
I mean, the West End, I really agree with Richard. It's incredibly right-wing because what it is showing is primarily musicals. It's an utterly right-wing form. It has a happy ending with its heterosexual middle-class couple.
But how can you possibly say that Cabaret is a right-wing musical?
It's not quite as successful.
I mean, it seems to me that the problem is here's
as anything goes.
no, the problem seems to me that you seem to be, I would say, is from a conservative point of view, confusing the format and the success financially with the politics. and also for that matter, almost with the audience, that if they come in their kind of coach nose, that must mean it's right.
So no, what I'm saying is to show the status quo to the status quo is a political act.
No, but all right, even if I take your points, open this up, even if I take your points about that, we have a status quo. It's not the status quo it was in the 1950s. It is a liberal, left, 1968 status quo. Where is the criticism from that, for that group? Has anyone got any points on that, or any other points?
Mine's Colin Cummings. I work at the Institute of Ideas. I mean, I take your point. I recognise that there is a kind of theatre establishment with a certain point of view, but there is something funny going on at a time when this happens, at a time when there isn't a left-wing political party in the mainstream. There is no challenge to capitalism. You're right, people don't present a happy case on capitalism and say it's a good thing, but these people aren't revolutionaries. They don't have a programme. They're actually quite complacent and settled. It seems to me it's much more of an aesthetic reaction against things. And you know, I can imagine someone could write a play which is a play supporting deportation of asylum seekers and so on, and it'd be very much frowned on. But that's what happens. That's what the government does. And there's not you know, no one in the political mainstream would say, I think there should be no controls on immigration or anything like that. So it does seem to me it happens on more of an aesthetic level, which would seem to suggest. I mean, I know part of the point of the New Culture Forum to challenge this idea that the right won the economic war and the left won the culture war, but that seems to be the framework within which it's operating. And you know, so in that sense, you're kind of asking for a play not to challenge the status quo in a political sense, but to challenge the theatre establishment, which is a rather smaller ambition.
Any thoughts? Yes, sir, yeah.
Yes, I find this notion that musicals are
Sorry,
essentially...
did you say your name?
Sorry?
Your name, sorry.
My name's Drake, I'm Alan Drake. I find this notion that musicals are essentially right-wing rather astonishing, since the longest-running musical in the West End, I think, is Les Miserables, the whole of which cast took the council Saturday matinee to go on the Stop the War demo. So the idea that musicals are essentially right-wing I find a bit extraordinary. But it seems to me that the issue has not been addressed, and which I do agree with Mr. Duffy here about the London-centric part, is the fact of subsidy. That what we're dealing with is subsidised theatre, and the people who live in or dwell in subsidised theatre, it's much easier to put on a play, and there's dozens and dozens of plays, I suppose, in the last 4 years criticising the Iraq War, than to put on a play praising the Iraq War or justifying the Iraq War. And I think that left-wing theatre just is I remember going to a question and answer session with Oliver Ford Davies in Galileo, who was appearing in Galileo, and he was talking about his life and so forth. And the gentleman, famous, I forget his name, critic from the Observer, asked him, he said, well, of course, Bertolt Brecht wrote this play, and about somebody who was, you know, not allowed to speak. But of course, the thing with Brecht was that he always, while his plays praised freedom of speech, he himself was rather compromised by the fact that he was a sort of supporter of East Germany and the communist regime in East Germany, you know, and the moral of Galileo equally applies to the communist regime in Germany. And Oliver Ford Davies, so of course, he said something about, oh well, Marxism is now sort of discredited, but I still think that he has a lot to tell us, you know. And I thought, has it really? You know, what, for example? You know, and it's this sort of assumption that I think, you know, the reason why we haven't got right-wing plays is basically because of subsidy. Is you have subsidised theatre, and people can put on plays, not just left-wing, but basically often very bad plays, simply because there is no commercialism. Where we have a commercial theatre, we either have non-political plays, either like The Eightborns or the musical, which are basically not selling a political message, or we have to have a message that would be acceptable to the audience.
Yes. Shelley, do you want to ask that?
I'd like to.
Yes.
Yeah, me too.
Do you want to go first?
Well, just, I mean, it shouldn't really